We finished up in Acts chapter 4 by thinking about that wonderful prayer that the people of God were united in praying together. We find out after that their unity goes beyond a superficial unity, beyond even just a spiritual unity, but extends to a practical unity as well. In other words, we know it's the real thing because of how they lived for each other and among each other. They so loved each other and so wanted to see the gospel succeed and take root and bear fruit that they were generous with all that they had. We read that the grace of God was so powerfully at work in them all that there were no needy persons among them. That doesn't mean that they had no needs, but that those needs were met every time by the generosity of God's people. It is in this context that we first meet Barnabas, a man whose actual name is Joseph, verse 36, a Levite from Cyprus, whom the apostles called Barnabas, which means son of encouragement. And, surprise, surprise, we see him doing an extraordinarily encouraging thing. Verse 37, he sold a field he owned and brought the money and put it at the apostles' feet, that it was to be used according to their wisdom to advance the kingdom. Now that is an amazing, amazing gift. The Bible is clear that while generosity certainly characterizes this entire early church, acts like this still stand out. These things are not happening every day, but from time to time, we read. Well, it seems that two people in particular have seen the kind of praise that can be gained through apparent generosity, and so they decide that they will give with the sole purpose of extracting praise from people. Now, it would be bad enough if they gave but had no real care for people or concern for the glory of God. It is a bad thing to give generously for the sake of earthly praise. This couple, Ananias and Sapphira, they go one step further than that. They don't just give out of wrong motives. They don't give generously, but still want the glory. Listen to this. A man named Ananias, together with his wife Sapphira, also sold a piece of property. With his wife's full knowledge, he kept back part of the money for himself, but brought the rest and put it at the apostles' feet. Now we soon find out that the problem was not that they ought to have given more. No, that's not the issue at all. Each person should give what they have decided to give in their heart, and that is always the pattern in the New Testament. The problem is that they sold their property and then tried to give the money to the church saying, this is the full amount. Aren't we great? The problem is the lie and the manipulation and the deception. Verse 4, Peter says, didn't it belong to you before it was sold? It was genuinely your property, as in you were under no compulsion to sell it. And even after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal? As in you were free, completely free to do whatever you wanted to do with that money, whatever you decided in your heart. You could well have said, look, we're giving half the money to the church and half the money we're reinvesting in some other property. Or even, look, we sold this property, we didn't especially need it. We can use that money for many purposes. One of those purposes is to advance the work of the kingdom. Here is some money. Fine. That is absolutely fine. The problem is they are claiming to have given the whole lot to God, but it simply is not true. When Peter confronts Ananias about his sin, Ananias falls down and dies. Shortly after that, he is buried. And then we read, about 3 hours after that, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter asked her, tell me, is this the price that you and Ananias got for the land? Yes, she said, that is the price. And, like her husband, she falls down dead. If you were a part of that church, what effect do you think that would have upon you? I think it would impress upon you, at the very least, the seriousness of sin. We live in an era of grace, obviously, but sin is just as serious now as it ever was. It grieves God just as much now as it ever did. It matters what you do, what you say, what you think. It really does. God has done them no wrong in taking their lives here. In fact, the wonder is that more people didn't die in this way, because that is what we all deserve. Now, it's worth saying there is no hint in the text here that Ananias and Sapphira necessarily died and then went to hell. We're not told. Let's assume for a moment that they were genuine Christians, because of course genuine Christians do sin. Genuine Christians are seized with moments of great pride and selfishness. They fall into all kinds of selfish, sinful endeavors. If God takes their life and then brings them straight into glory, they wake up on the other side of death, having not suffered from any great, long, drawn-out disease, having not suffered some life-ending sickness, having been literally brought from earth to heaven in one instant. They would not be complaining on the other side of death, I promise you. In fact, they would be glad and grateful to be in God's presence and free from the sins that have enslaved them in so many ways, to be unable now to soil the reputation of Jesus or themselves any longer, to be spared another, 20, 30, 50 years of earthly hardship and toil. Ananias and Sapphira were not wronged in this at all. And the people of God were given a sobering, serious reminder that sin really does matter, and God is glorified when we choose to be obedient to Him and prefer the praise of God to the praise of men.